Varieties, for example, Australian, American, and New Zealand variety, and so on and so forth. The so-called native varieties of English are superior, are better, are richer, and Indian languages, for that matter, are deficient. This is a very common, prevalent, belief. And these beliefs, which are assumptions, and by the way, when we assume things, let's look at the spelling of the word assume. When I assume, I make an ass of you and me. So assumptions are important, but if the assumptions are positive, we have positive impact on language policy. When the assumptions are negative, we have adverse impact on language policy. So native speakers are better teachers. These are misconceptions. Native speaker teachers are better teachers than non-native speaker teachers. One, native varieties are better, richer than Indian languages, or even better than Indian English as a variety, so on and so forth. So all these misconceptions or beliefs or views have some impact, either positive or mainly negative, or mainly adverse impact on deciding as to how to go about choosing languages. Like, for example, we have several English medium schools in our country, and English is, all subjects are taught through English, and they also learn English as a skill subject. So English is not only a medium, but also a skill subject, and other subjects like Hindi, Marathi, of course, they are taught in those specific languages, not through English, right? And one last belief, that there are so many. In fact, I have an article on misconceptions in the field of English language teaching. One very predominant, one very influential misconception is that, for example, mother tongue is a hindrance. Right? Outside this school, I saw a board, speak only in English. Right? I saw it yesterday and day before yesterday. So, mother tongue, in my opinion, is okay. Mother tongue interferes, no doubt, because there are differences between mother tongue and other tongue.
Yes.
But mother tongue also intervenes. Interference is a negative expression. Intervention is a positive expression. So let's look at the similarities between languages, and Chomsky, for example, talks about the language universals. There are similarities across languages. And if we tap those similarities, we can facilitate the process of teaching and learning. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Right. Thank you, Professor Patel. Now let's go to Bangladesh. And you can imagine, Bangladesh is also a small country like Nepal. But still in that country, there are 40 plus languages spoken. So how are these languages incorporated into the policy, and how English is brought into the picture? Over to you, sir.
Okay, thank you. Let me just begin by thanking NELTA and its dynamic and wonderful president for inviting me to this wonderful conference. Okay. You have rightly mentioned that Bangladesh has around 40 languages, so naturally it should be called multilingual country, but I would say that it's monolingual. Why? Because about 98% of the population speaks one language, that is Bangla, mother tongue. I'd like to also remind you one thing, that in today's time, the world is going to celebrate the International Mother Language Day. You know that. And if you know about its history, the initiative actually was taken by Bangladesh, because Bangladesh has a glorious history of that, which is called Language Movement, Bhasha Andolon in 1952. Probably Bangladesh was the first country or only country who sacrificed and fought for the right of the mother tongue. In 1952, when Bangladesh and Pakistan was one country, Bangladesh was known as East Pakistan and current Pakistan was West Pakistan, Bangla was the majority language. But the regime tried to impose Urdu, which was a minority language, as the state language. Right. Then the resistance came from mainly the students and teachers, and they laid down their lives, and which is now later in 1999 it was recognized by UNESCO, and it was declared that the 21st of February as the International Mother Language Day. So, but the interesting fact is that we fought for our mother tongue, okay, and policy-wise, there are many, you see that 39 other mother tongues. But now when we are imposing teaching language policy in education, you see that the focus is on Bangla only. We are forgetting all other mother tongues, the tribal languages or indigenous languages. And one of the main foci of this day, International Mother Language Day, is to preserve or is to promote the linguistic and cultural diversity, right? And to create awareness of preserving these minority languages. But unfortunately, it's not happening, right? So it's rather, although there are 40 languages, it's becoming a monolingual country in terms of language in education policy.
That's right, because I would like to speak my language if I can see menu in the restaurant in my language, poster on the wall in my language. So people tend to promote their language if they see it in the public space. But as you rightly mentioned, this is not happening in Bangladesh, and this is not happening in Nepal too. So in Nepal, we have more than 123 languages according to the earlier statistics, but in between we have identified 5 more languages. I think many more are coming, which were silent, and the government has brought constitution that guarantees the right for children to learn in their mother tongue. So how is this politics playing around in terms of language policy in education in Nepal? Hemant sir. So over to you.
Thanks a lot. This is not only interesting question, but also very pertinent question. The challenge we have in Nepal is the policy making is essentially a top-down process. And I want to relate with the grammar structure or sentence, subject, verb, object, or first person, second person, third person. Who decides policy? Politicians. Who persuades the children to take up the language? Parents, second person. So, politicians, first person, parents, second person, and actually the learners are the third person. And these people are never asked, neither by the government nor by the parents. And parents persuade them to go to English medium school and learn good English. They start speaking English from the very first day. So the problem begins from there. That is one point. Another point is the constitution of Nepal is the main entity that provides the key guidelines fundamentally in relation to the language policy also. And the constitution of Nepal is completely silent about the role of English and the position of English. It talks about Nepali language and other national languages. Again, in the practical level, if you see how many children are going to the English medium schools, you can imagine this single school, some of the big schools, in one school there are 6,000, 7,000, 8,000 students. They start learning English from their very first day. My point here is the kind of controversy between the policy and the practices and the interest of the parents. It is very hard to say what is the interest of the students until unless we really conduct a rigorous research, right? So multilingualism, we are talking about multilingualism, mother tongue education, we are talking quite a lot. That's good, we enjoy talking, we enjoy using our language. And I have seen, and in terms of the policy, there is no policy in English at all. And the controversy between the Constitution and Education Act. Constitution is quite silent, but Education Act is vocal. it gives the position, not position, but it prescribes English.
Right.
As a result of which English comes into the curriculum, national curriculum, followed by the textbooks that go in with the objectives that go into the classroom situation.
Right.
We keep teaching and learning.
Okay.
Right? So, in a nutshell, the position of English practically is in Nepal. It is in some location a cow milk. It is in some locations this is a tiger milk.
Okay.
So I think this policy should be developed by the local government,
Okay.
considering the context and the needs of the learners.
Right. Thank you. Thank you for highlighting the role of the local governments. Now we move to the second round. Very interesting round. Now there is a political party, political level, and there is academic level. You all guys, you are researching on the ground. There are decision makers who dictate the policy of language education. And many of you are working on, we are talking about English language, right? Because we are in the NELTA conference. We can't forget English in this discussion. So you are trying to figure out how English is best taught in the classroom, in the multilingual context, using translanguaging and other innovative pedagogies, practices there. And the politicians are there who know, maybe I can fairly say that, who know nothing about what goes on the ground. So in these two extremes, I think there comes the role of TAs, teacher associations. There comes the role of NELTA, BELTA, MELTA, IATFL, TESOL. And when I looked at the relationship between the teacher association and the government, in the US, there is a very, it's tricky, not always very cordial relation between TESOL and the State Department, but in many occasions they co-work together in terms of the policy of teaching English as a second language to the speakers of other languages. Also, I have seen the similar situation in IATFL and the UK government. And now, in this round, very briefly, 2 minutes each, I would like to hear from you, how has been the partnership between the practitioners, evidences, and the policy through teacher associations, globally from you, and locally in the context of Nepal, Bangladesh, and India. So, Tracy.
Thank you. So I think that notion of policy, I was just thinking about that, and to think of sort of some of Stephen Ball's work, where he talks about, policies are often held up as being a solution to things, aren't they? But in actual fact, they never are. They're a set of problems that teachers then have to solve, and all of those engaged in education have to solve. So you're right, the role of teacher agencies there are really important. So an agency like IATFL, I think it's sort of fair to say, has a very sort of externally looking remit in terms of education in the UK. So in terms of it being TEFL, so it's the teaching English as a foreign language, but that would be more of the global ELT market, I guess, that would kind of have more influence on. Associations like NALDIC would have more interest in language as it's constituted in everyday sort of primary, secondary schools, tertiary education. I think the government would possibly listen to IATFL maybe more because there's more money potentially involved in that than there would be with sort of something like NALDIC. But I think for IATFL what's interesting, and I'm just looking at their conference this year with Ophelia Garcia, also talking about translanguaging. So in that sense, again, the kind of the role that IATFL can play in certainly shaping the way that teachers are trained to teach either within the UK or externally, the type of message we're taking, and particularly in sort of the era where we cannot not discuss sort of decolonisation and the role that sort of ideology plays in any kind of language instruction. So I think IATFL has a key role in those kinds of moves, I think.
Right. So English, in terms of making policy of teaching English as a foreign language overseas, there is a very strong and positive role.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, there should be.
Right,
it
should be.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. And then in terms of, I think there has been influence from institutions like IATFL on how English is conceptualised within the mainstream.
Mhm.
But we would also argue that those students who are learning English as an additional language, as a medium of instruction, plus a curriculum content,
Right.
are sort of different types of learners in a way. So in that sense, other organisations involved in what that looks like and kind of lobbying government for changes to the way that that works. Because otherwise it is, is really,
Right.
there's very little space for much discussion about multilingual pedagogies in
Thank you.
those classrooms. Thanks.
Thank you, great. Now we can start from Bangladesh, no problem. How has NELTA been associated with the government in terms of making policy for language education in general and English language education in particular? And what could it do more?
All right.
Yes,
Thank you.
two
Thank you.
things.
About NELTA, let me just say briefly that NELTA was actually